And hello, everyone. Welcome to the third episode of the Furlough Network webinar. We are so happy to have a good friend of mine and healthcare extraordinaire, Jane Sarasohn-Kahn, join us today. So Jane is not only just a leading health economist, advisor, healthcare consultant, and trend weaver for clients in the business of healthcare, focusing on health, technology, and people, but one of the smartest people I know when it comes to healthcare and the consumer space. So Sean and I are so excited to have Jane join us today. So thank you, Jane, for being here. We appreciate it.
I'm so happy to be with you both.
So Jane, before we dive into all this fun things that are going on with health consumer and the future of our health right now, one thing we wanted to kick off with is ask you is, what is something during this quarantine process that's become a new favorite activity for you, something you've learned, or a new passion of yours since being stuck at home in your new place in King of Prussia?
Thank you. Well, I'm happy to have mastered the Zoom background capability without a green screen. That's been kind of a new fun thing, even though I've been Zooming for a while. I think having had a home office for the better part of 20 years, becoming kind of a touch point for people that I work with, clients and friends who've never worked at home before, with kids, without kids. And early on, like the third week of February, people starting to call me saying, how do you do this? So it's been fun to kind of share the best practices of me working at home. And one of the funny things is, there's become this meme about pants and people dressing above the desk but not below. But I'll tell you the God's truth, and my husband will tell you, since I started very early in this kind of working environment after 10 years in big consulting firms, I always, Sean, put on lipstick, makeup, wore tights or dresses. And I've always dressed, even though nobody could see me back then, even 20 years ago when we were working on big compact personal computers. And this is when there was no open internet. This was America Online, CompuServe, and Prodigy. I mean, I'm that old. But I think it's been really gratifying to see that people can work at home, can be productive, and increasingly employers get the fact that, oh, we don't have to watch over you, that you're being productive. And if anything, the data have just come out in the last few weeks. People are working more hours at home than they did when they had to go to a work space. So I think companies are learning this could be a new normal for many.
No, I totally agree. No, absolutely. And I think for me, during the furlough process, so going through this right now from a mental health perspective for me, I found, so I'm a big Orange Theory person. So I go to my studio. I'm used to going. I go to the 8 o'clock class in Cherry Hill all the time. And now I am converting to Orange Theory workouts from home, which I just did the 1 o'clock class before this. But it's really finding that mental health, and that is so important. And then that schedule of still getting up at the same time and then trying to stay on that. And I know we'll talk about this later with Cinco de Mayo too, of how much drinking you're doing. So that glass of red wine you're having every night with your hubby and spending that quality time. So definitely looking at that too from a health perspective around mental health has been a big thing as well.
Yeah, I think that Orange Theory, is so important. So many companies have pivoted really quickly to help people figure out how to hack their way through this much longer period than anybody thought. So you brought up a really good example of one company I would point to that's really in the health is everywhere space now.
Yeah. Sean, how about you with the two crazy kids running around?
Yeah, well, the new thing I'm doing is actually with one of them. So my son and I are taking guitar lessons together now. It's actually his guitar lesson, but it's a Zoom thing, and I'm like off to the side supervising, but I also have my guitar.
Supervising.
Yeah. So we're on the Happy Birthday song. We're crushing that. Doing really well. But yeah, it's so cute to see how excited he is about it, and just to be there for every lesson now, and just to kind of see how he interacts, and he's really enjoying. He's pretty good too. It's funny when kids, like if you teach them golf or soccer or whatever, like their form is usually really good, and his guitar form is just really good because he didn't have a whole lifetime to develop terrible habits like I did. So it's really cool. It's really fun to watch.
It's so great too, because education is one of the things that would bring us more health and wellness, to learn a new hobby, to learn baking, to learn new exercise, yoga, people taking up yoga who never did before. And here you are doing something intergenerational, fun, educational, and music is good for wellness and spirit too. So that kills a lot of birds with one stone.
Exactly. And I am not a very good math teacher. And so I couldn't be that a math teacher. I was trying, I just do not have the patience for it. And I know that about myself. I'm like, it's 5 plus 4, dude, 4 plus 5, it's the same thing. And then when it doesn't translate, I'm like, I'm out. I'm losing it. I'm out. Let's go back. I'll do the guitar. Mommy has to do the math with you. I can't do it.
Yeah.
Good for mom.
So no
Mom's
limitations, you know. Yeah,
That
mom's hooking it
girl.
up. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, Jane, just to kind of kick us off today, one of the things that we've been thinking a lot about, and Sean and I have been talking about, is really finding your health. And I got to tell you, if I had something going on with me, it would take everything for me to go to an emergency room right now, or to go get healthcare, or to step in any type of facility. I even get a little bit wigged out when I'm stepping to a CVS pharmacy that has a minute clinic or something there. So really, what are you thinking about when it's thinking about finding your health right now and the future of health when we think about it from a consumer perspective?
Well, as you said that, I reached for my Teladoc card because I actually had a non-COVID issue 2 weeks ago, and I was damned if I was going to go to my doctor or to a minute clinic, and it was 11 p.m. at night, so my doc wasn't around. I did email my doc through the portal, but I called Teladoc. It was great. It's a covered benefit under my health insurance. And so many people now, to avoid seeking the doctor, are using telehealth. And what's exciting about telehealth now, I've been, as a health economist, forecasting markets for health technology forever. And I've been watching telemedicine for over 20 years. It's the advent of online and digital. It took till this Black Swan event, COVID, for people to all of a sudden say, oh, I have that benefit, I'm going to use it. So we saw in late Feb and to the middle of March, hockey stick growth of online virtual care. And it's exciting. And I think this too for health is going to be a new normal. So that's sort of for health care. More and more doctors and patients will meet up online. What's exciting is you can do it on your phone now. Medicare and commercial insurers will pay, even using FaceTime, Zoom, Google Hangout, other platforms that aren't HIPAA compliant for the time being. But I think more and more we're going to see privacy amp up to meet this new digital world that we don't want to leave behind after the pandemic in months or a year from now. Finding our health, though, the opportunity in COVID and the stay-home era is to look around your house, look around your neighborhood, look at your e-commerce channels, and of course, online, whether it's Sean finding a Khan Academy music class with his son, or you doing Orange Theory online, or increasingly finding community digitally if we are managing our alcoholism or addiction. There are communities now online. Church is online on Sundays. I'm Jewish. We did Zoom Passover, and my husband's Catholic, and we did Zoom Easter with his family. I think the opportunity is when we think about our Maslow hierarchy of needs, the basic need on the bottom for hunting and gathering our food and water, we're taking care of that through Amazon and Instacart, and sometimes going to the brick and mortar grocery if we're really brave and masked. I'm in Pennsylvania, so we wear masks now when we go out or into stores. But increasingly, we're finding the digital connections for our health, our mind, our body, our spirit, and that's really exciting. So if you have broadband connectivity, and you can't assume everybody does, certainly if somebody's watching this, they do. But if you work in healthcare or education, the assumption is kids could do school at home and be connected. And in fact, many students in urban areas, rural areas, et cetera, don't have access to connection. So one of the opportunities, one of the learnings coming out of this is that don't assume that everybody can connect. But now connecting, we've learned here, is a social determinant of health and is really like clean air, clean water, housing, food. If we can't connect, we can't go to school now. We can't get healthcare now, a la this, or finding mental health online in a community, or even mental health through Walmart, which in many states now offers online counseling through licensed psychologists and psychiatrists. So I think, we find our health now with our food, with our movement, our exercise, with meditation, with sleep, which is really important right now to get sufficient sleep, and then through connecting, just like you and Sean, Lauren, are doing here with your wonderful Furlough Network. So I think you look for your health based on your values, your connectivity, your neighborhood, and really be honest with yourself about what you need, particularly with mental health and sleep, which whether you're younger or older, sleep now is a problem. So we need to get a handle on that.
Yeah. And one thing I wanted to ask you off that, Jane, because I know going through this right now, so going through my furlough period, I'm going on week 3 and it feels like month 3 of being in furlough, and mental health is a big piece of that you're talking a lot about. Work was a big purpose of mine, of my life, right? Like a big piece of my purpose was my work that I do and my clients I love and my interactions. And another big piece of that too was going to my, I'm getting my MBA from Villanova and going and being with my cohort. So from a mental health perspective, how are you helping consumers to think about mental health and really to rethink around how are you still making sure you're taking care of yourself during this time of so much uncertainty, especially for our viewers too?
The first thing, and particularly for people who are caregivers of pets, parents, children, mates, friends, community members, you put your mask on first, as you do on the airplane. And self-care is the new black. So, I mean, right now we are all experiencing anxiety, stress, depression on a continuum. And I've been collecting data to rethink my own views on the healthcare consumer in the COVID era, because that's really where my work is right now, is who are we now in the COVID era in terms of being healthcare consumers. Mental health is clearly going to be the pandemic after the pandemic. So we get through COVID over the next 6-12 months, being realistic about vaccines and therapeutics getting approved by the FDA. And then will we want to go to a concert, in not just in a stadium, but in a small coffee house? Will I want to go to my beloved Wegmans to shop ever again? Like, to me, that was a holy grail of health. The pharmacy, I could get my blood pressure read, food as medicine, which is one of my big things, slow cooking. We're all now starting to feel the stress and anxiety. And then as we come through this, we will have our own form of PTSD. So, and that's real. And I'm going to say, I've already feel anxious. Like when I come home from the post office, I need to sort of take deep breaths, because you armament yourself with your mask and your gloves. And we're not used to that in America or much of Western society. So it's a new life flow. We will get used to it. We may wear masks forever going forward. It's going to be our new normal. But the fact that, on the upside, we're in it together, and we hear that over and over and over again, but it is absolutely true. This experience is a great leveler across income, across gender, across race. Now, poorer people feel it harder. Frontline workers feel it more, God bless them, from the grocery clerk to the ER doc. But it is a very humbling moment for everybody. And so getting real about mental health and mental fitness, wellness, resilience, again, a gift coming out of COVID is we're all going to need it. So we're all going to need to man and woman up about it, and really be our best healthy selves through it, and figure out, okay, it's not going to be alcohol that's the real fix. It's going to be exercise and positivity and love. And even if I can't hug you, Lauren and Sean, I love you, and we're going to love in new kinds of ways, you know, and we're going to express it. We're going to write it. I'm still making my cards and writing letters and posting them off, and not email, but you know, people really like a good card. And it's Mother's Day next weekend. So even though we might do a Zoom Mother's Day, we could still send flowers. We can still write that card, and can't let Hallmark go out of business. So, you know, we got to keep some traditions. But yeah, it's finding your health based on your values, what you want, and being really ruthless with yourself right now. This is an opportunity, whether Sean's learning guitar or you're learning yoga at Orange Theory, or a new, you know, mastering a new position on the floor. Hey, it's a learning moment for everybody.
So, Jane, let me ask you about that, because I love the part about the mental health, because I think what you said about it being the pandemic after the pandemic is 100% accurate. I see it and I feel it. And, you know, God, Lauren and I hope you don't mind me saying, but in the last 2 weeks, how many times have we called each other like freaking out about some existential crisis we're having, right? So that's real. What else are you seeing? This is just a question I had kind of in the future, talk about after the pandemic, non-coronavirus related health implications, both positive and negative, about the situation we're finding ourselves in right now.
Yeah. So as I'm tracking the Nielsen data on our shopping habits, we see some categories growing and some receding. Clearly, companies like Rent the Runway, where a woman can go or a man can go and get, you know, Manolo Blahnik shoes for the next party. That's a sad business to be in right now. Nobody's going out to wear Manolos, and we're not wearing them under our desk, I assure you. You know, maybe RuPaul is, and that's fine. God bless RuPaul. I ain't. You know, my sketches and my thongs are here. My flip-flops. Thong is something else to a lot of people. I don't wear those. At least I'm not going to tell you that I do. But the thing is, where were we going on this? I'm sorry.
You went off on thongs and we never came back.
And we never came back.
We're talking about categories of purchasing.
Yes.
Two items, sadly, that are have grown in the pandemic are alcohol and gun sales. That is not a good combination, as we know. And I saw somebody at the UPS store go absolutely postal the other day, not just because it was UPS, Postal Service, but a guy just flipped out about somebody driving in front of him in the parking lot by Trader Joe's in Wayne on 202. Lauren, you know where that is. And I was just dropping off a piece of technology to send back to Staples for a 90-second scan and leave. And I'm thinking, I'm going to die. If this guy has a gun in his pocket yelling at another customer who apparently cut him off in the parking lot, this is my demise right now. And, you know, to your point about calling each other, saying, I'm freaking out, something's happening, these are our new normal moments too. So if we think about, you know, the bad part of this, looking for stress relief through alcohol and through having a gun to make us feel better, that's not going to make us feel better. I have a public health degree, amongst other things. And when we used to do health risk appraisals before it was politically incorrect, we asked people if they had a gun in the house, talking about in the 80s and early 90s. And we would click yes or no, there's a gun in the house. So if we knew a family was having some problems, a doctor or a counselor could intervene ahead of time to see how the family's doing. But a gun in the house is a high risk for a gun getting used. If you don't have a gun in the house, you can't use a gun. So in my world in public health, these are things that are really red blinking lights in a moment like this. On the dark side, on the brighter side, the fact that we can have this conversation, we can say, I'm hurting. I can say I'm hurting at any point in time to anybody this way and see us. You know, and I think when my parents got married just before World War II, and my dad went off literally in 3 weeks after they got married, and they didn't see each other for 3 years, They wrote letters that took a long time to go across to the Pacific and back to Detroit, Michigan. And I was thinking about my mom and dad the other day, who aren't here anymore, and thinking, you know what, they got through that. They got through 3 years of not talking. And my dad came home jaundiced and with malaria, the greatest generation guy, macheting through the Philippines. And I was thinking, I can do this. You know, I'm taking instruction from my father, who's right here, telling me, yeah, life goes on, kid, keep going. And it's not so bad. So we need to remember that hunting and gathering before us was much more challenging, and they didn't have Instacart and they didn't have the internet.
Right.
And I don't know, I think we have to get history back in our mindsets to really know how lucky we are, even in this moment, in this moment.
And I like that.
We must not have food to eat, for example. Right,
because I like that, because it gives a proper priority and context to what we're dealing with. And I'm not a public health expert in any way. I don't even know if I took a course, but bear with me here. Is one of the things that I'm experiencing, I think all of us are experiencing, are boredom and repetition, and the Groundhog Day nature of what we live in are almost catalysts for unhealthy behaviors, right? If you're predisposed to maybe alcohol or drugs or binge eating or binge whatever, it seems to be exacerbated by our current situation. Are you experiencing that? And if not, what are you doing to get around that? And are there any advice for everybody out there?
Yeah, you know, the days do blur into one another. So that today is Tuesday, but I kept thinking it was Monday, and it looks the same as Friday. And if you have a home office, it looks the same as Saturday and Sunday if you don't switch it up. So switching it up is important so that you don't keep, scheduling for exercise is important. Eating well at the right time of the day is important. But one best piece of learning for me was from research done by two guys called Christakis and Fowler, and they wrote a book called Connected a few years ago, and it was the statistics of social networks for good or for not so good. So if your social network offline, so your friends, your family, your neighbors, or online, us, if your social network has healthy behaviors, doesn't drink too much, eats well, doesn't smoke tobacco, mentally, honest and tries to be positive, good sleep, blah, blah, blah. If your social network has good habits, you will tend to have good habits, and your network's network will tend to have good habits. If you're a binge drinker or having unsafe sex or shooting guns off at weird places or whatever, you will tend to have people in your network who do something like that, and you influence them in that behavior. But what's fascinating about the statistics that Christakis and Fowler figured out in their research is that your network will have that behavior. So think about this positive, empowering moment. You make a choice to quit smoking right now when it's really hard to do because you're stressed. You make a choice to quit. You quit. You are influencing someone, maybe not in your direct network, but in your network's network. So it's this good thing that you're throwing out in the world. And statistically, this is real. This data holds up. So it's kind of like you have this opportunity now to stop binge drinking, to reach out, to get help. And then what you're doing is going to help somebody else who you may know or you may not know, but they're out there. And all of a sudden that spiritual thing happens, the cortisol falls down, you start to be proud of yourself, because it is hard to quit something. Behavior change is hard, but if you can now, you could conquer the world, because this is the time when it's really tough.
Yeah.
But you're also doing something so good for your world and your world's world.
Yeah.
So I like to think about that a lot. And I think about that as being a health citizen, being someone who doesn't only believe that we should all have health care, but you care about the health of the people around you. Because I do think we're in that moment now with COVID. That's why we wear masks, not to protect ourselves, because those bandana masks aren't going to do much for us. They're going to help the person at Wawa who's giving you your coffee on a Sunday morning when you're picking up the New York Times, like I'm doing every Sunday.
Mm-hmm. No, I love. Yeah, and Jane, it's funny because when I think about when I met you when you were delivering a keynote, and you deliver keynotes for audiences of the thousands at really large health events and technology events. When do you think realistically you'll be on stage again? And will it ever look the same when we think about HIMSS and these major healthcare conferences? What do you think about that from a future perspective?
I have been thinking about it because it's part of my business model. And the business model now is all virtual all the time. So thankfully I can do that, and I have this technology. But Lauren, I can't imagine, for example, CES, the Consumer Electronics Show, every January I've gone. Next January would be my 11th CES to see big screen TVs and cars and digital health stuff. And last year I had my book featured last year, and I'm thankful, thank you, Fates, that it was, there's my book, that the book wasn't picked for 2021, because I don't think it's going to be happening that way. I did see the basketball league coming together, talking with the Mandalay Bay in Vegas to host all the basketball players, all their families for 2 months to do basketball games there. Nobody leaves the compound for 8 weeks, right? Testing, play the game, get off the court, sell your ads, a new normal for now. Will we have big healthcare meetings, big media meetings? Will I go to the amusement park anytime soon? Not soon, but I think one day we will have some in-person meetings. I don't know that there'll be 150,000 people in Vegas for CES for a long time. It won't be in January 2021.
Right.
CES won't be that. They're talking now about what they're going to do. I don't know yet what that's going to look like. But Lauren, your question is, thinking the unthinkable, which we have to think about. What is the future of the big meeting? I would hate not to have a big meeting ever again, not so much for the glory of standing in front of people, but for seeing my peeps that I've worked with for 20 years or 10 or 3 like you in these venues for networking. How do we network that way? LinkedIn doesn't do it for me. I mean, I link in with everybody, of course. But I miss that. As a Broadway actor might miss the live show, or Melissa Etheridge, I just heard last night, who's giving concerts from her house every night. She misses the live adrenaline, and I love that part of it. So I don't know the answer to that, except that we have to be honest and talk about the fact that we're not going to have that for the rest of 2020. Probably.
Sure.
And 2021, when we might have vaccine and therapeutics for this particular virus is the question. And then after that, how do we risk manage? Is it masks? Is it, immunosuppressant therapies? There's a whole roster of possible hacks for people who travel. And I travel a lot. My husband's global. And what will air travel look like? What will hotels look like? I don't know. I know that people who are in the business of those thin plastic screens that they now have in convenience stores, airplanes will probably have those next to seats. I've been reading a lot about that. So that's a good business to be in right now.
There you go. Investment advice. I like it, Jane.
Well, and Jane, the one last question we wanted to ask before we kind of head off is, everyone seems to be in healthcare right now. who do you think is leading the way, and what trends are you seeing when it comes to companies that are doing it well in the healthcare space?
Yeah. So we, in my world, and through my lens, I believe in self-care and creating your own health at home as much as possible, so you stay the heck out of the health system, because we know bad things can happen, like catching viruses, and not just this one, but just, nosocomial infections and things that happen in hospitals, or being cut on the wrong side of your kidney. Anyway, we really find health everywhere. So I think there are grocery stores that are doing health well. You mentioned Orange Theory. So Hy-Vee. I get H-E-B and Hy-Vee mixed up because of the H. Hy-Vee, which is a grocery chain, has partnered with Orange Theory to put those gyms inside their grocery stores. And then there's a little daycare area where mom or dad can drop off the child while mom or dad exercises in an Orange Theory in the store. As we start to see our lives, which are so complicated and time crunched, retail and in the community, places, touch points in the community, bringing these services together to streamline our lives, that's really the future of health and healthcare. So we think about the importance of financial wellness in our lives, and now we're all broke because, we're furloughed or we take a big pay cut. I know lots of lawyers who are taking 20-50% pay cuts to keep staff on. We're all doing what we can and managing finances such as it is. So we have to think about, how do we do this cost effectively? And it's not through beds in hospitals. It's through community. It's through pharmacy. So we think then about what Walmart's doing with its primary care clinics located with Walmarts. There are 2 in Georgia right now, but they're going to be scaling that model around the country. They're begun to offer mental health, telemental health through virtual means, through the phone or through safe HIPAA compliant Skype with a therapist. So more and more, we're going to access health services in this way, and not through, Pill Hill at the medical school.
Yeah.
That also can potentially lower costs if we get the financing part right. My vision after COVID, depending on the November 3rd election, we just have to mention that since it's May of 2020, if we have a change in leadership in the US, we will have a different kind of healthcare reform. And hopefully universal health care, so that everybody has access, because we can see now it's a mess. You lose your job, you lose your health care in many, many cases, because COBRA is so devilishly expensive to continue to pay for your health care, and you can't because you're unemployed. So it doesn't make any sense anymore in this world that we live in. So I think we're going to see some interesting wrinkles and riffs on what healthcare could be, should be, and particularly as we health consumers in America reimagine ourselves as health citizens with rights and responsibilities for our healthcare and to inspire health in the people we love and in our networks.
I love that. No, that's awesome. And Jane, I always call you whenever I need somebody to pick me up or make me feel better with all this craziness going on. So for those of us who are furloughed, laid off, going through this challenging time, what message would you leave them, or word of advice during this kind of difficult crisis that we're all going through?
I think you are not alone. We are not alone. We know everybody's impacted by this. This isn't 9/11. This isn't the recession. This is a triple whammy. This is health. This is the economy. This is mental and spiritual health. This is everything. The world has not seen this before, at least in the last 100 years. So I think it's a great leveler, as I said, and it's also humbling. And this is the time to really reach out and find who you are at the core, and know that we can be there with and for each other. So that's how I would leave it. Also, none of us should be defined by our job. That is not self-actualization. Self-actualization is here, it's here, and it's here, So a job's a job, and and no employer's gonna go on your tombstone. What goes on your tombstone is, friend, daughter, son, father, community member, good person.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we leave behind.
That's great. Well, no, and Jane, thank you so much for joining us. And I know you said you welcome anyone connecting with you on LinkedIn. So please, for all of our viewers to connect more with Jane, feel free to follow her on LinkedIn at Jane Sarasohn-Kahn, or pick up this amazing read, Jane's book, Health Consuming, which is absolutely one of my favorite reads that I have and really helping me to think differently about the health environment. So Jane, thanks for joining Sean and I. We appreciate it.
I so appreciate what you two are doing, and I love being with you.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you
Jane.
both.
All right, guys.
Okay.
See you soon.
Bye.